Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Transmigrated to a medieval Pokémon world. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Quick update. The series What If Transmigrated as Minato Namikaze and What If Fishing System in Food Wars World will be going on hold soon, since we're nearly caught up with the author. So now, I need your help picking the next project for the channel. I'm currently deciding between these three fanfics. What if creating the strongest Strawhat crew by reading manga? What if Transmigrated and taking over Ichigo's body? What if martial artist Reborn is Kenichi Shirahama? Please vote in the poll and let me know which stories you'd like to see next. I'll take the top 2 picks and start working on those series next. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 81, Harvest Day. But this one still doesn't seem quite complete. Lucian mused, turning the half-finished Pokeball in his hand. The Pokémon inside wouldn't be comfortable staying in it for long. What if we line the inside with something soft? Morik suggested suddenly. Like cotton? Cotton? Lucian blinked, a little surprised. Still, they didn't have any better ideas for now. After a brief pause, he nodded. That's worth trying. Go ahead and experiment, Morik, I'll leave this to you. Yes, Your Highness. Morik carefully accepted the incomplete Pokeball and left the room, clearly eager to improve it. Once he was gone, Lucian leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes in concentration as he tried to recall everything he knew about Pokeball construction. Modern Pokeballs, the ancient designs from the Hisui region, the apricorn balls crafted by early artisans. There was once a craftsman in the Johto region known as Steel, a man who could turn apricorn fruit into Pokeballs through painstaking manual work. But that method was notoriously complex. Crafting a single Pokeball could take him an entire day, sometimes more if it was a special variant. Lucian remembered something Steel had once written in his journals. Within every Pokeball is a fine, invisible web. This web binds the Pokémon once it is drawn inside. If the creature still has strength, it can tear the web apart and escape. Only when it grows weak will the web hold firm, and the capture will succeed. That was why most modern trainers weaken Pokémon before attempting to catch them, not to harm them, but to reduce their energy until the web could form a stable binding. But what exactly was this web made of? Was it the silk spun by Ariados and Joltik, woven into an energetic lattice? Or perhaps some other mysterious material capable of resonating with a Pokémon's aura? Neither the anime nor any scholarly texts offered a clear explanation. Lucian thought for a while, then smiled faintly to himself. Well, perhaps we can test it one day. Coincidentally, Ariados lived in the Unova region. Its silk was famous for its toughness. In later generations, fishermen would use it to weave nets, while tailors made soft scarves that could even repel rain. Unfortunately, no Ariados had been found near their territory yet. That idea would have to wait for another time. April 7th, year 149 of the royal calendar. By morning, the crops in the fields had fully ripened. Standing at the edge of the farmland, Lucian looked out upon a vast golden sea of wheat. The gentle breeze swept through the stalks, creating shimmering ripples that stretched toward the horizon. At this moment, nearly everyone in the territory, both human and Pokémon, had gathered there. Joy brightened every face. Your Highness Lucian, it's a bumper harvest, a farmer exclaimed, holding up a handful of heavy, golden ears of wheat. Lucian accepted them with a smile. You've all worked hard these past months, he said warmly. The farmers grinned. It's our duty, sire. Nearby, the three Snover bounced forward excitedly. Snore. Lucian chuckled. Yes, you three deserve praise too. He patted their snow-capped heads gently. Of course, credit also went to Snivy and Dugtrio. Snivy stood off to the side, arms folded with its usual air of pride. Lucian glanced at it and said softly, Thank you for your hard work, Snivy. Snivy, it huffed, pretending indifference, but the small flick of its tail betrayed its happiness. Lucian smiled but didn't comment. Instead, he raised his voice to address the others. All right, everyone, let's begin the harvest. Sickles glinted in the sunlight as humans and Pokémon alike moved through the fields. In addition to wheat, the ripened crops included rye, radishes, and potatoes. The wheat and rye would be milled into flour for bread. The radishes would serve as fresh vegetables. And the potatoes, high yield and easy to store, would ensure that no one in the territory would go hungry again. As Lucian watched the lively scene before him, a sense of relief and pride welled up in his chest. This was the fruit of their labor. The first true harvest of his fledgling realm. He exhaled softly, a faint smile curving his lips. Lucian watched the busy figures moving through the golden fields and thought to himself. One portion of the harvest will be milled into flour for food, and another will be kept for seed. This time, Lucian planned to distribute some of the harvested seeds among his people, along with small plots of land, so that they could begin cultivating on their own. After seeing firsthand how Pokémon could aid in farming, the people would no doubt try to seek out wild Pokémon to help them as well. Before long, many might even wish to raise Pokémon of their own. Snover, Combi, Petalai, Mareep. With that, once traveling merchants began visiting, these common folk could trade goods in return, which would, in turn, attract more merchants to the growing settlement. Over time, this territory would surely flourish into a thriving domain. As for taxes, Lucian decided he would discuss the matter later with Elif. Besides, this land would soon need a proper system of laws and governance to maintain order, though such reforms could only begin once the town was fully built. By evening, the harvested crops had been gathered into great heaps across the territory. To celebrate the bountiful harvest, the villagers had changed into their best clothes, garments they'd once been too reluctant to wear, and now gathered at the heart of the settlement, singing and dancing under the warm glow of lanterns. A host of Pokémon living in the territory also joined the festivities. Snover, Shuckle, Minccino, the two Machoke, Zorua, Haxorus, and Simzir all mingled happily among the laughing crowd. Lucian stood a little apart, watching the scene beside Dratini and Snivy, a faint, contented smile on his face. Your Highness Lucian, aren't you going to join them? Elif asked softly. Lucian shook his head with a smile. If I join, everyone will get self-conscious. Let them enjoy themselves freely tonight. Elif followed his gaze toward the joyous crowd. If they were still in the royal capital, he thought, there would already be poets composing verses to praise the young prince's name. As Lucian's eyes drifted toward the piles of grain, a sudden thought struck him. Elif, remind Gerald to post guards at the granaries tonight, he said, his tone serious. If a wild Snorlax appeared in the area, that would be disastrous. Even one small Snorlax could devour their entire stockpile overnight. Gerald nodded solemnly. He understood better than anyone how vital this food was to the territory's survival. I'll take charge of the watch myself, he said. I'll bring Haxorus with me. By the way, Gerald, Lucian said suddenly, as if remembering something. Yes, Your Highness? Gerald turned toward him, puzzled. Lucian handed him a piece of parchment. This contains everything I've learned about Haxorus. It may be of some use to you. Gerald blinked in surprise, then leaned closer to the firelight to read. It was written. Haxorus, Dragon type. Special moves, Dragon Claw, Slash, Crunch, Dragon Dance, Earthquake, Dragon Pulse, Swords Dance, Outrage, and Draco Meteor. Your Highness, these are. Gerald looked up, eyes wide. Lucian said quietly, from what I've observed, monsters are capable of growth. As their chosen partners, it's our duty to help them grow stronger, to become their best selves. Understanding dawned instantly in Gerald's expression. If Haxorus grew stronger, then the next time they fought side by side, they could face any foe, and triumph together. Chapter 82 His Highness's favor is not over. After the harvest celebration, the people of the territory, hearts filled with hope for the future, slowly dispersed and returned to their homes. Among them was Cliff. Due to the growing population and the lack of sufficient housing, Cliff currently shared a small cabin with a man named Frick. Both of them were once slaves of the kingdom. Back in the royal city, they had eaten dry, rock-hard black bread and thin porridge barely fit for humans, day after day of endless labor without rest. Back then, Cliff and Frick had believed their lives were over, trapped in darkness, with no hope for the future. But now, everything had changed. His Highness Lucian had not only abolished their slavery but had granted them citizenship, giving them the right to live freely within his territory. He had even provided homes, where they could finally rest on soft beds instead of cold stone floors. And now, His Highness was even distributing seeds, allowing them to cultivate their own plots of land. That meant that, for the first time, they could grow their own food, and never again fear hunger. Neither Cliff nor Frick ever wanted to return to their old lives. They cherished this new freedom with all their hearts. Upon returning to their small cabin, they knelt on the floor with reverent expressions and murmured their gratitude to His Highness Lucian. To them, he was like the sun itself, radiant, warm, and life-giving, illuminating what had once been an endless night. For the first time, life felt truly hopeful. That night, lying in their separate beds and gazing into the darkness, Cliff suddenly spoke. "Frick, we can't let His Highness Lucian down." They had decided they would work even harder to repay His Highness's kindness. Frick chuckled softly in the dark. "Do you even need to say that?" Cliff smiled, then turned thoughtful. "The power of magical beasts, it's incredible," he murmured. Indeed, neither of them had ever imagined that monsters, those mysterious magical creatures, could possess such wondrous abilities. "I wonder," Frick said wistfully, "if one day, I'll meet a magical beast willing to follow me." He was thinking of Lucian Snivy, and of Peppa and George's three Snover, the way those monsters worked alongside their partners in harmony. If he could someday meet such a creature, it could help him tend the land and sow the seeds for his new life. After spending time among the Pokémon in the territory, the two former slaves had lost much of their fear. In fact, Frick found many of them not only powerful, but also adorable. He wasn't alone. Cliff felt the same. Watching the Pokémon run freely through the settlement each day filled him with an emotion he couldn't quite name, a strange warmth, a sense of connection. That night, as the cries of wild Pokémon echoed faintly from the forests beyond the walls, Cliff and Frick lay in bed, feeling a deep, quiet peace settle over them. Dreaming of the lives that awaited them, they slowly drifted into sleep. Across the territory, similar scenes played out, homes filled with laughter, gratitude, and dreams of a better tomorrow. At Lucian's residence, the young lord sat quietly by the fireplace, gently massaging Dratini's body as soft flames flickered across the room. Before him, lines of glowing notifications began to flash across the panel of his territory system. Satisfaction plus 10. Satisfaction plus 25. Satisfaction plus 20. He glanced at the numbers updating in real time. There were now 299 human residents and 28 Pokémon living within the territory. The day's harvest had secured their food supply. At last, no one had to fear starvation. And with their basic needs finally met, the hearts of his people brimmed with gratitude. As their joy flowed into and through the system, notifications continued to cascade across the screen, like golden rain. After 3 full minutes, the stream finally ceased. Total satisfaction, 2,500. Lucian exhaled slowly, his lips curving upward. This means new technology can be unlocked. Furthermore, Lucian noticed something new. The loyalty of many civilians in the territory had risen significantly. A quick glance across the territory system revealed that most people now maintained loyalty levels between 85 and 95. Only a handful had reached the maximum of 100 individuals such as Elif, the loyal old butler, Gerald, the steadfast knight, Anna and Ryan. But what caught Lucian's attention most was an unexpected name. Citizen name, Cliff. Age, 22. Occupation, none. Special ability, none. Loyalty, 100, max. Life record. In the 127th year of the royal calendar, Cliff was born in a small village in the kingdom of Cassiac. In the 135th year, the kingdom of Cassiac was destroyed, and Cliff was captured by the kingdom of Eindhoek. In the 145th year, Cliff lived as a slave in the royal city of Eindhoek. In the 148th year, he was brought to His Highness Lucian's fiefdom. In the 149th year, after Lucian abolished slavery, Cliff was freed. He has since regarded His Highness as the sun that illuminated his life and vowed to work tirelessly in gratitude for this mercy. Lucian, so that's how it is. Though momentarily at a loss for words, a faint smile curved across his lips. The man's sincerity was unmistakable. Not bad, Lucian thought. I could rely on him in the future. However, one detail in Cliff's record caught his attention: the kingdom of Kasiak. Lucian's expression grew thoughtful. In this world, the Pokémon continents were far larger than what the old legends or the games of the ancients had described. Even now, Unova, known locally as Eindhoek, was not a unified nation but a patchwork of kingdoms and duchies. Eindhoek was the most powerful among them, yet scattered along its borders were many small, unstable realms like Kasiak, long since erased by war or absorbed by their stronger neighbors. Lucian leaned back, lost in thought. It was a reminder that his own territory, however peaceful now, still rested on the edge of a fragmented world. At that moment, a brilliant white light suddenly burst forth beside him. Snivy! Lucian's head snapped around instantly. It was coming from his Snivy. The serpentine Pokémon's entire body glowed, energy swirling around it like liquid sunlight. Lucian's eyes widened. Is it evolving again? But Serpini's face twisted with resistance. Rather than embrace the change, it clenched its small fists and fought against the surge, its willpower visibly straining against the flow of evolution. After a long, tense moment, the brilliant light dimmed and finally faded away. Snivy collapsed to the ground, panting heavily, its green scales slick with sweat. Snivy! Lucian murmured softly. Nearby, Dratini watched, head tilted in confusion. Woo, it trilled. It couldn't understand, why would a Pokémon refuse to evolve? If it were in Snivy's place, it would have embraced evolution without hesitation. To grow stronger meant being able to protect Lucian and itself. But Serpini offered no explanation. Instead, it straightened slowly, its amber eyes firm and unwavering as it met Lucian's gaze. Snivy. Lucian studied it in silence. This won't do, he thought grimly. If Snivy is truly resisting evolution, I should find a way to support that choice. He recalled something from his memories. Everstone, a mysterious stone infused with stabilizing energy. Pokémon that carry it will retain their form and never evolve. Lucian exhaled quietly. Maybe, there's something like that hidden in the mines. Chapter 83, The World Across the River. Lucian's thoughts drifted back to the firestone he had once found near the hot springs. The world of Pokémon was rich in natural treasures. Beneath the soil lay not only iron and coal but also a vast array of unique, mysterious ores, evolution stones of every element, everstones, moonstones, dawnstones, and more. Each of these stones shared a deep connection with Pokémon. Some held the power to awaken new potential, while others could trigger evolution, transforming a Pokémon's very form and nature. Lucian glanced toward Snivy, who stood quietly beside him. Don't worry, Snivy. Tomorrow I'll ask the miners if they've come across any Everstones. If we find one, you won't have to endure unwanted evolutions anymore. Snivy. Snivy looked up at him and nodded softly, a rare gentleness flickering in its golden eyes. The night passed peacefully, moonlight spilling through the window and across the sleeping territory. By dawn, Lucian was already on his way to the Lord's Hall, as was his daily routine. Inside, Elif, Geralt, and several other key retainers were waiting for him. As soon as Lucian entered, Elif stepped forward with his usual composure. Your Highness, the spring harvest is nearly complete, he reported. As you instructed, we've already stored a portion of the grain to be used as seed. Lucian nodded approvingly. Seed preservation was no small matter, he knew that much. During harvest, the farmers had to carefully remove weeds and diseased plants, keeping only the healthiest, fullest heads of grain to ensure future crops would grow strong. Afterward, the seeds needed to be dried under the sun, turned daily to prevent dampness and mold. Lucien didn't have to give these orders himself. The ancient farmers of this world possessed wisdom that rivaled even the agricultural records he recalled from his past life. "Excellent work," Lucien said. Then, turning to Gerald, he added, "Gerald, have the miners bring me a sample of each ore they've unearthed. I want to examine them personally." Gerald tilted his head, curious. "Your Highness?" Lucien smiled faintly. A good lord should understand every aspect of his domain. Only after identifying the ores can we decide how best to use them. Gerald's expression softened with admiration. After these months together, he had come to respect this young prince deeply. Compared to the rulers of the royal city, His Highness Lucien was a leader who combined kindness, wisdom, and courage. "As you command, Your Highness," Gerald said, bowing before heading out to fulfill the order. Lucien dismissed the rest with a wave. "Good work, everyone. Let's keep moving forward." He still had his own duties, training Dratini and Snivy, and later, visiting the mines. As Gerald departed, Elif lingered for a moment longer, a small smile forming on his face. "By the way, Your Highness," he said, "the boat you requested has already been completed." Lucien blinked. "So soon?" Elif chuckled. "It's only a small vessel, suitable for short crossings. The construction was simple, so it didn't take long." "Is that so?" Lucien's eyes brightened. "Then let's go see it." "At once, Your Highness." The two of them made their way to the riverbank. From a distance, Lucien could already see a small wooden boat tied to the dock, the sunlight glinting off its smooth surface. Further along the river, several other fishing boats bobbed gently in the water. Shirtless men cast wide nets into the current, their laughter echoing faintly across the waves. Lucien watched the scene quietly and noticed that their occupations, once marked as unemployed on his system interface, had changed. They were now listed as fishermen. Elif followed his gaze and explained. These men were fishermen back in the royal city. When they saw the boat builders at work, they decided to return to their old trade. Lucien's lips curved into a smile. "Good. Then they can sustain themselves without relying on the monsters for everything." It was progress, small, but meaningful. "Your Highness," Elif said softly, "do you plan to cross to the other side today?" Lucien nodded. Elif had expected as much. At the water's edge, a sturdy worker already waited with an oar in hand, bowing as Lucien approached. "Your Highness Lucien." "Take me across the river," Lucien said calmly, stepping forward. "Yes, Your Highness." The boatman quickly untied the rope as Lucien climbed aboard with Dratini and Snivy at his side. With steady strokes, the oars sliced through the current, and the small wooden craft began gliding toward the opposite shore. Gentle ripples spread out in concentric rings, shimmering beneath the morning light. Lucien gazed across the expanse of water, silently estimating its width, no less than 20 meters. Beneath the clear surface, he could faintly make out the silhouettes of fish and a few water-type Pokémon darting gracefully through the depths. A school of Magikarp glimmered like bronze coins, while a few Basculin and Goldeen swam lazily nearby. Along the banks, a cluster of Psyduck waddled about in confusion, scratching their heads and quacking softly. Farther out, several curious Bizel poked their heads above the surface, their round eyes following the boat as it passed. So many Pokémon living here. Lucien thought, eyes narrowing with interest. This river is far richer in life than I expected. Before long, the boat brushed gently against the far bank. The boatman steadied the vessel and bowed. "Your Highness, I'll wait for you here." Lucien nodded in acknowledgement, then stepped onto the soft, grassy shore. Turning back, he looked across the wide river toward his own territory. From this distance, he could see everything clearly: the fishermen casting nets, farmers bending over rows of wheat, women washing clothes by the stream, and children laughing as they played with their Pokémon companions. The land was full of life, sunlight, and the sound of progress. Across the water, Elif, who was watching from the dock, cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted, "Your Highness, please be careful." Lucien waved a hand in reassurance, smiling faintly. Don't worry, Elif. He turned and began walking deeper into the plains with Dratini and Snivy by his side. The land here was vast and fertile, a sea of waving grass under the clear blue sky. All around, wild Pokémon moved freely among the fields. Rattata darted between patches of tall grass, Cottonee drifted lazily on the wind, Petalil and Rosalia bloomed among the flowers, and in the distance, Elegant Sawsbuck and Blitzel grazed together peacefully. Lucien slowed his pace, quietly observing the scene. A few bold Sawsbuck lifted their heads as he approached, but instead of running, they watched him curiously. Lucien reached into his pocket, taking out a handful of ripe berries. Here, you like these, don't you? One of the stags hesitated for a moment, then cautiously trotted forward. With surprising delicacy, it plucked a berry from his hand and began to chew. Lucien chuckled softly as the Pokémon's eyes lit up in delight. Soon, the others followed, circling him and bounding lightly across the grass. As expected, Lucien thought, amused. Feeding a Sawsbuck is the quickest way to earn its trust. But before he could take another step, a low rumble echoed across the plains. The Sawsbuck froze, ears twitching. Then, as if struck by instinctive fear, they turned and bolted in all directions. Lucien frowned and looked up. A huge armored beast was charging toward them, dust billowing in its wake. Its metallic hide gleamed under the sunlight, and its horn glowed faintly red from the friction of its run. Rhydon! Lucien realized. The massive creature had locked onto him, the only human standing openly in the plains. Snivy, Magical Leaf. Snivy! The grass-type Pokémon sprang into action. Energy flared around it, condensing into a flurry of glowing green leaves. They shot forward like blades, cutting through the air in swift arcs. The storm of leaves struck Rhydon's armor with a chorus of metallic clangs. Despite its stony hide, cracks appeared where the attack struck true, slicing across its body in glittering lines of green light. Chapter 84, Tropius. Roar! The Rhyhorn bellowed in pain, its deep voice echoing across the plains. Its eyes locked onto Snivy, full of fury and disbelief. Digging its hind legs into the soil, it snorted heavily, then charged again, thunderously tearing through the grass in a cloud of dust. But Snivy didn't panic. Calm and sharp-eyed, it waited until the last possible second before snapping its vines forward. Two vine whips lashed out in perfect unison, striking from opposite directions and coiling tightly around the Rhyhorn's thick limbs. With a sharp twist, Snivy pulled. The mighty beast stumbled mid-charge and crashed heavily to the ground, sending a small tremor through the plains. For a brief moment, the Rhyhorn lay there, dazed and breathing hard. Then, as if realizing the vast difference in their strength, it gave a short, frightened snort, and turned tail, galloping off into the distance. Lucien blinked. And it ran. He exhaled through his nose, half amused, half resigned. Rhyhorn, a ground and rock-type Pokémon. Tremendously strong, but not exactly known for its intelligence. Brute force without strategy. Lucien shook his head and looked back across the fields. There was no need to chase it. With the threat gone, he turned his attention once more to the other wild Pokémon nearby. Among the grass, he noticed a small, timid beauty peeking out from behind a cluster of flowers. A grass-type Pokémon, adorable and seemingly harmless, but Lucien knew better. The pollen it released carried mild toxins, capable of causing sneezing fits and watery eyes. This one, however, looked more frightened than dangerous. The moment Lucien and his Pokémon stepped closer, it squeaked in alarm and hid deeper in the tall grass. Lucien crouched down, gently pulling a ripe berry from his pouch. "Hey there, Beauty," he said softly. "It's okay. Come on, this is for you." The little Pokémon peeked out again, blinking uncertainly at the berry in his hand, then at Lucien himself. Seeing the calm smile on his face and sensing no hostility, Beauty hesitated for only a moment longer before inching forward. It sniffed the berry, then began nibbling happily. Lucien chuckled quietly and reached out to pat its head. "You're a sweet little thing, aren't you?" As if encouraged by the peaceful scene, the Sawsbuck herd that had fled earlier slowly returned, curiosity gleaming in their gentle eyes. They gathered around Lucien and Budu, lowering their antlers as they watched the human and his Pokémon interact. Lucien laughed softly. Unable to resist, he pulled out a few more berries and offered them up. The Sawsbuck eagerly accepted, munching contentedly. But once the berries were gone, several of them turned their gaze toward his satchel again, their big eyes shimmering with expectation. Lucien held the bag protectively. No, that's enough. The rest are for Mareep. The stags snorted softly, tossing their heads in mock annoyance before bounding away, their hooves thudding rhythmically against the grass. Lucien rose to his feet and continued onward, his eyes scanning the plains. Ahead, he spotted a herd of Blitzel galloping through the fields. Their black and white stripes flashed like lightning as electric sparks crackled across their manes. He didn't approach. Blitzel in their evolved form, Zebstrika, were known for their volatile temperaments and strong electrical discharges. Even with Snivy and Dratini at his side, confronting them would be reckless. Lucien wisely chose to skirt around their territory. Consulting the small parchment map Christina had drawn for him, he followed the marked route toward the Mareep habitat. Before long, he reached a lush green meadow. There, grazing peacefully under the sun, was a fluffy herd of Mareep, their wool shimmering faintly with static electricity. Lucien's eyes brightened. Found them. He slowed his pace, motioning for Snivy and Dratini to stay quiet as they approached. The nearest Mareep lifted its head, blinking curiously at the newcomers. Bah! It bleated softly, tilting its head. Lucien smiled. But the Mareep didn't flee. Lucien cleared his throat softly, adjusting his tone to sound as gentle as possible. Ahem, hello there, Mareep. Bari? The flock tilted their fluffy heads in unison, a few question marks practically floating above their expressions. What was this human up to? Lucien couldn't help but smile. You're even cuter up close. He took a few careful steps forward, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. Seeing the sincerity in his eyes and sensing no hostility, the flock began to relax. A few Mareep even bleated softly, their tails flicking in delight as Lucien praised them. Bari! That's right, Lucien said warmly, opening his pack. I brought you all a little gift. He drew out a handful of berries he'd prepared beforehand. The moment the words left his mouth, the Mareep perked up and trotted closer, surrounding Lucien, Snivy, and Dratini in a loose circle of woolly, golden bodies. Lucien counted quickly, 7, maybe 8 in total. Fortunately, he'd brought over 20 berries. Even after feeding the Budu and Sawsbuck earlier, there were still enough left to share. Perfect. The Mareep lowered their heads, sniffing the fruit curiously before nibbling eagerly. Their eyes half closed with joy as they chewed, their wool crackling faintly with tiny sparks of static. Though they clearly preferred tender grass, the berries were a welcome treat. While they ate, Lucien slowly extended his hand toward one of them. But the moment his palm brushed its wool, zap! A small jolt ran through his hand, sharp and tingling. Lucien winced slightly, withdrawing his hand with a laugh. So it's true. Mareep's wool really does store electricity. The shock wasn't strong enough to hurt him, just enough to make his fingertips buzz. Soon, the Mareep finished their berries and turned their round eyes back toward Lucien, as if waiting for more. Lucien crouched and smiled. It's a pleasure to meet you all. I'm Lucien, the Lord of the Lands across the river. From now on, I hope we can get along. Bah! The Mareep blinked in confusion. They didn't quite understand what lord or territory meant. Lucien chuckled. You'll see soon enough. We'll be expanding across the river soon. Once the land is ready, we'll plant plenty of fresh, delicious grass near the banks. If you ever get hungry, you're welcome to come graze anytime. You'll always be welcome in my territory. That part, at least, they understood. This human named Lucien was planning to plant fresh, tender grass across the river, and then invite them to come eat it freely? Was there really such a kind person in this world?
The Mareep blinked, wide-eyed and confused.
But the young man before them didn't elaborate further. He simply smiled, rose to his feet, and bid them farewell before turning away with his 2 Pokémon.
Lucien hadn't come to capture anyone today.
He only wanted to make contact, to establish a bond of trust. Once the ranch was built, these Mareep could come and live there peacefully. By all accounts, his plan was going well.
Lucien was just about to head back when Dratini suddenly lifted its head, its sapphire eyes reflecting the sky above.
Woo! Lucien followed its gaze, and froze. A massive shadow passed overhead, gliding gracefully across the sunlight. High above them soared a magnificent creature, its entire body a mix of warm brown and gray-green hues. A long, elegant neck stretched forward, its thick limbs moving with slow, deliberate power. Large, palm-like leaves fanned out around its body, and on its back grew 4 enormous fronds that fluttered like wings, keeping the creature aloft. But what truly caught Lucien's eye were the golden, banana-shaped fruits hanging beneath its chin, gleaming in the sunlight.
Lucien's breath caught. That's Tropius. Chapter 85, Vespiquen.
Tropius, a grass and flying-type Pokémon. Whether in the games or in the anime, it had always been considered a rather obscure species, rarely discussed, rarely seen.
It couldn't evolve, its stats were modest, and its battle performance was nothing extraordinary.
Yet despite that, Tropius possessed a trait few other Pokémon shared. The fruit of harvest. Around its long neck, golden banana-shaped fruit would periodically grow, sweet and nourishing. Ordinarily, the fruit only ripened twice a year. But for a Tropius with the harvest ability, that cycle could shorten drastically. Sometimes new fruit would sprout every couple of days.
In certain regions of the anime's world, entire Tropius ranches existed.
People there tended to the gentle creatures, gathering their fruit for sale or saving it as treats for children.
Lucien couldn't help but imagine. If a Tropius could be raised within my territory,
then they'd have yet another stable source of food. He looked back toward the distant horizon. Unfortunately, the majestic creature had already flown far away, shrinking into a faint speck in the sky. Without a flying-type Pokémon of his own, there was no way to follow.
Lucien sighed in regret, watching until it disappeared completely.
Still, there was one comforting thought: if a Tropius had been spotted here, it meant that somewhere nearby, others might live. And if they continued to develop this land, someday he would encounter one again.
"Let's head back," he said finally. He returned to the riverbank, boarded the small wooden boat, and crossed back to his territory. Elif was already waiting for him. "Your Highness, did you find anything worthwhile?" Lucien nodded.
"I discovered a Pokémon called Mareep.
Its wool contains electricity, it can be spun into cloth or woven into carpets. It'll be useful for our settlement."
Then, after a pause, he added, "Elif, I want a ranch built across the river. Nothing grand, just fence off a plot of land and have the farmers plant grass inside." Now that they had boats, transporting timber would be easy. He also intended to introduce a few grass-type Pokémon to the pasture. Their natural energy would help the grass grow richer and healthier, providing food for the Mareep. And in turn, the grass Pokémon would thrive on sunlight and water, needing little care themselves. Together, they would form a self-sustaining ecosystem, a perfect, living pasture.
"Yes, Your Highness," Elif replied eagerly.
Meanwhile, deep within the forest, sunlight filtered through the leaves and glimmered on a towering tree trunk. There, nestled among the branches, hung a calm beehive. The massive honeycomb exuded a sweet, golden fragrance. Under the calm direction of their Vespiquen, countless combi buzzed busily, flying in and out of the hive. Standing at the foot of the tree were Anna and Zoroa, watching the scene with bright smiles.
Their mission, entrusted by Lucien, was complete.
For days, Anna and Zoroa had been helping the combi find flowers, guarding them as they gathered nectar, and even driving away wild beasts that tried to steal the honey at night. Through patience and kindness, they had earned the combi's trust, and now even the Vespiquen regarded them as friends. At that moment, the Vespiquen descended gracefully, carrying a broad green leaf. Resting atop it was a small pool of translucent golden honey, gleaming like amber and releasing a rich, sweet aroma.
The queen extended it toward Anna. Anna blinked in surprise. "Is this for us?" Vespiquen nodded proudly. Anna's expression softened.
She accepted the gift carefully, her smile bright as sunlight. She thanked the Vespiquen, then carefully shared the honey with Zoroa, the two savoring it together.
"It's so sweet," she exclaimed, smiling brightly. Vespiquen's face softened in delight at the sight.
But soon, her smile faded. Turning around, Vespiquen gazed toward the busy combi darting in and out of the hive. Her eyes filled with quiet worry. Lately, the forest had become increasingly dangerous. Almost every day, wild Pokémon came to steal their honey, sometimes even breaking in at night while they slept. If this went on, the hive's production wouldn't be able to keep up with what was being stolen. Even though Anna often helped drive off the thieves, Vespiquen knew she couldn't rely on her forever. Anna couldn't protect them for the rest of their lives. Vespiquen let out a soft, troubled sigh.
"Ha? Vespiquen, are you worried?" Anna asked, tilting her head in surprise. Vespiquen nodded gently. But Anna couldn't understand her exact words.
That's when Zoroa, sitting beside them, tilted its head and spoke up softly.
"Zoru? You're worried that the honey will all be stolen, aren't you?" Vespiquen looked toward Zoroa and nodded again. Zoroa's mind flashed with memory, the task Lord Lucian had entrusted to it and Anna. It realized this was the perfect moment to fulfill that mission. "Zoru, if you're willing to trust us, I might know a way to help you." Vespiquen blinked, looking at Zoroa in surprise. The fox explained patiently, "Zoru. Outside this forest, humans have built a settlement. Anna and I came from there. That place has been inviting Pokémon to join. If you're willing, you and your hive could come too. The humans there will protect you, and even help you gather nectar." At first, Vespiquen didn't look overjoyed.
Instead, her eyes narrowed in thought. There's no such thing as a free meal, and humans never help others without reason.
Then she asked slowly, Zoroa replied honestly, "Zoru. In return, you'll just need to share a small portion of your honey."
Vespiquen hummed, clearly pondering.
Zoroa continued earnestly, "Zoru. Don't be afraid, they won't take everything from you. The ruler of that land is a kind one.
He'll help you and even plant a whole field of flowers so you can live peacefully there."
Those were Anna's own words, ones Zoroa had heard many times. And having lived in Lucian's territory itself, Zoroa knew firsthand, those humans never harmed Pokémon. They protected them. As Zoroa spoke, a glimmer of hope shone in Vespiquen's eyes.
If everything the little fox said was true, then maybe her colony could finally live without fear.
Sharing a bit of honey wasn't much of a price to pay. As long as there were flowers to gather nectar from, they could make more. Her real concern lay in the forest's shrinking resources.
The flowers nearby were already scarce, and once they ran out, her workers would have to fly farther and farther just to find blooms.
Chapter 86, Pokémon Ranch. Construction of the Pokémon Ranch progressed at a remarkable pace.
Boats carried loads of timber across the river, where skilled workers processed the wood into sturdy planks and posts. Within days, a wide stretch of land was fenced off with a simple wooden enclosure. The next step was the rancher's house, a humble dwelling for the caretaker and their Pokémon.
It didn't need to be grand.
Most Pokémon preferred the open air to confined rooms, so the hut simply had to keep out the wind and rain. Under Lucian's personal supervision, the ranch was completed in just a few days. Soon after, in the Lord's Hall, Lucian sat at his desk with Elif and several others, discussing who should manage the special new ranch.
There were two important requirements for the role. First, the candidate must not fear Pokémon.
Second, they needed to be careful, patient, and kind, able to care for creatures that required both trust and understanding. Lucian flipped through several reports detailing the citizens of his domain, his brow furrowed in thought.
Elif, watching him, offered a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, Your Highness. Once this ranch succeeds, others will soon follow the example." Lucian nodded slightly. He wasn't worried about that part, he knew his people. Once they saw the benefits of living alongside Pokémon, more would be eager to try. Then who, he asked, would be most suitable to run the ranch? Elif paused for a moment before replying. "Your Highness, what about Riku?" "Riku?" Lucian repeated. Elif nodded. "The man who's been raising chickens within the territory." Ah, Lucian remembered now. When the knights discovered wild pheasants nearby, Riku had taken the initiative to domesticate them. He'd shown skill and responsibility, but... Lucian frowned slightly. Raising chickens isn't quite the same as caring for monsters. Elif understood his hesitation at once. "In that case," he said thoughtfully, "what about Megan? You entrusted her with the Magikarp some time ago. She's taken excellent care of them, and unlike most, she's not afraid of magical beasts." Lucian's eyes brightened. "A good suggestion. Send someone to fetch her." A maid bowed and hurried off. Moments later, she returned with Megan in tow. Megan looked nervous as she entered the hall. Surrounded by Lucian, Elif, and the others, she fidgeted with her hands. Elif gave her a kind smile. "Don't be nervous, Megan. His Highness just wishes to ask if you would like to take charge of the ranch." Run the ranch?" Megan blinked, startled, and pointed at herself. "Me? You mean me?" Lucian smiled softly but did not answer right away. Instead, he asked, "How are the Magikarp doing?" At the mention of her Pokémon, Megan's face brightened instantly. "They're doing great, Your Highness. They're so well behaved, such obedient creatures." Lucian nodded, pleased. "It seems you've built a good relationship with them. And remember, Megan, not just Magikarp, but many monsters are like that. Treat them with kindness and care, and they'll always respond in kind." He leaned forward slightly, his tone warm but firm. "I believe in you. If you can raise Magikarp with such patience, I have no doubt you can care for the monsters on the ranch as well." "But..." Megan hesitated, lowering her gaze. "I'm not sure if I can. I'm just an ordinary woman. I don't have any special skills." "You must believe in yourself, Megan," Lucian said gently, his tone steady but encouraging. "Why don't you give it a try first? You won't be alone, the 6 Magikarp you've raised so well will move with you to the ranch. Together, you'll care for the other monsters there." Megan hesitated, her fingers tightening around the hem of her dress. After a long pause, she finally nodded. "I understand. I'll do my best, Your Highness." Lucian smiled faintly. "Good. Here, take this." He handed her a small booklet filled with neat handwriting. "It's a guide I compiled on the care of monsters, feeding habits, temperaments, and preferred environments. Read it carefully when you have time. And if anything confuses you, don't hesitate to ask." "Yes, Your Highness." Megan accepted it with both hands, bowing slightly. Her palms were slick with nervous sweat, but there was a hint of determination in her eyes now. Lucian tilted his head slightly. "You live with your brother, don't you?" "Yes," Megan replied quickly, startled that he remembered. "Then how about this?" Lucian said. "You and your brother can both move to the ranch. I recall he's been tending to the bull monsters, hasn't he? His experience should come in handy." Megan nodded again, this time with more confidence. "Yes, Your Highness." Lucian's expression softened. "Good. You can return home for now. I'll have someone deliver suitable monster to you once everything's ready." "Yes, Your Highness." She bowed once more before leaving the hall, clutching the booklet to her chest. Lucian watched her go, her figure disappearing beyond the doorway. Stretching slightly, he turned to leave, planning to begin another training session with Dratini and Snivy. But before he could step outside, a lively voice called from the courtyard. Teacher. I've brought the combi back. Lucian blinked. Combi.
A moment later, Anna burst through the door, beaming, a large bucket of golden honey clutched in her arms. The rich, sweet scent filled the entire hall. Behind her fluttered a small procession of magical beasts. A Vespiquen, elegant and regal, followed by dozens of buzzing combi, their honey-colored wings glinting in the light. Lucian's eyes widened in brief astonishment before a knowing smile crept across his face. "Well done, Anna," he said warmly. He. Anna grinned, scratching her cheek in embarrassment. Actually, it was Zoroa who convinced Vespiquen and her hive to come. "Thank you for your hard work, Zoroa," Lucian said, turning his gaze toward the fox Pokémon standing proudly beside Anna. Zoru. Zoro puffed out its chest, clearly satisfied with itself. Lucian's attention then shifted to the Vespiquen and the buzzing swarm of combi that followed Anna into the hall. The hive's queen regarded him with calm, steady eyes, neither hostile nor fearful, while the combi hovered in a protective circle around her. As the ruler of the hive, Vespiquen understood what it meant to lead. She had already weighed her decision carefully before coming here. She spoke first, her tone dignified and measured. Lucian couldn't understand her exact words, but the fact that she had come at all was proof enough of her willingness to cooperate. After a thoughtful pause, he smiled faintly and addressed her with respect. "Welcome, Vespiquen, and you, faithful combi. I am Lucian, the lord of this territory." Vespiquen inclined her head gracefully, wings humming like silk in the air. "I imagine Anna has already explained our intentions," Lucian continued. "We hope to work together. The honey you and your hive produce is vital, not only as food but as an ingredient for medicine and trade." He met her gaze with solemn sincerity. "In return, I will grant your colony a vast flower field, rich with nectar and safe from harm, where you may gather freely and brew your honey in peace." The combi buzzed softly among themselves, even Vespiquen's stern expression softened slightly. "In addition," Lucian went on, "we will see to your safety. No wild monsters will be allowed to harm you or steal your honey. And when winter comes, when the flowers wither and nectar grows scarce, my people will share our own stores of honey with your hive, so that none of you will starve through the cold." Chapter 87. Lucian's offer was one the Vespiquen could not refuse. Hearing his words, Vespiquen froze for a moment, surprise flickering across her amber eyes. She had already heard much of what Zoroa had said before deciding to come here, but she hadn't expected this, that these humans, in addition to offering protection, would even provide food to help her hive survive the harsh winter. In winter, when all flowers wither, the combi cannot gather nectar, and without nectar, there is no honey. Without honey, there is no food, and both she and her workers would eventually starve. Normally, they stored enough honey to last through the cold months, but if something went wrong, if thieves or wild Pokémon stole their reserves, they would have no way to recover. And so, Lucian's proposal was not merely generous, it was salvation. After a long silence, Lucian spoke again, his voice calm and patient. "What do you think, Vespiquen?" The queen's clear, resonant voice rang out in reply. She agreed without hesitation. Leading her combi forward, she performed a graceful bow, the bee's formal salute, to the young lord before her. Lucian exhaled softly, relief mingling with satisfaction. "I'm glad," he said, rising from his chair. "Then let me show you where you'll be living. I've already arranged for someone to stay with you and help care for your hive." Vespiquen nodded, her expression serene but grateful. Her gaze drifted toward Anna, who had stood quietly by her side all this time. As part of their migration, the hive had brought along the entire stock of honey they had stored. Vespiquen stepped forward, gently taking the wooden bucket of honey from Anna's hands. Hovering in front of Lucian, she presented it to him with solemn dignity. Lucian raised an eyebrow. "For me?" The queen nodded lightly. "Thank you," Lucian said with a faint smile. He accepted the gift and handed it to Elif for safekeeping. This sweet honey was valuable, more than a simple treat. It could be used in desserts, brewed into medicines, or, when placed outdoors, could even lure rare Pokémon. Pokémon such as Heracross, Snorlax, Levany, and Roserade were particularly fond of its scent.
Please, follow me, Lucian said, gesturing toward the door. B.
With a hum of wings, Vespiquen and her combi followed close behind. Lucian nodded to Elif as they walked out, signaling him to summon Megan. Then, leading the small procession, he made his way to the riverbank. They boarded a wooden boat and crossed to the far shore. Beyond the gentle waves lay a wide, open plain, and in its midst stood a brand new Pokémon ranch. A sturdy wooden fence enclosed the area, and tall scarecrows stood sentinel at the corners, warding off any wild Pokémon that might approach. According to Lucian's instructions, the carpenters of the territory had already built and installed a hive for Vespiquen and her combi. Standing before the newly placed hive, Lucian gestured toward it and said with a smile, "We're here. This will be your new home. And this is your caretaker, Megan." Vespiquen's compound eyes flickered with satisfaction as she surveyed her surroundings. The sturdy wooden fence enclosing the area gave the hive a sense of safety and stability. As for the human who would tend to them, Vespiquen turned her gaze toward the young woman standing nearby. Megan, for her part, had been quietly observing the Pokémon, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. When she suddenly met the Queen's gaze, she startled slightly before mustering her courage. "Hello," she said, her voice soft but sincere. "B." The Queen buzzed in acknowledgement, apparently content. Lucian smiled faintly. It seemed no further arrangements were needed. Under Vespiquen's direction, the combi immediately began building their nest within the hive. From their small bodies, they secreted a golden, honey-like resin that soon coated the interior walls, giving off a sweet, fragrant aroma. Once the hive was properly structured, Vespiquen took command, guiding the combi to begin gathering nectar from the fields. The wide plains surrounding the ranch were already blanketed with wildflowers, and Lila had recently transplanted several additional varieties into her herb garden to ensure a steady source of blossoms. The combi flitted busily back and forth between flowers and hive, carrying fresh nectar to be brewed into shimmering sweet honey. Then, Vespiquen, combi, you can live peacefully here now. Anna called out with a wave. We'll come visit you often. B. Vespiquen's tone carried a note of cheer. Clearly, she was pleased with her new home. Seeing that everything was settled, Lucian turned back to Megan. "I'll have someone send over some flower and grass seeds," he said. "Find a good spot to plant them and create a flower field. That way, Vespiquen and her hive won't need to travel far to gather nectar." He paused, then added, "If you have any trouble or need assistance, you can always ask the farmers or the Doug trio in the territory for help." "Yes, Your Highness." Megan nodded quickly, her expression earnest. Lucian smiled again, then seemed to recall something. "In time," he continued, "we may bring another herd of monsters to the ranch. When that happens, they'll need your care as well." "No problem," Megan replied brightly. Even so, her thoughts drifted back to the pond near her old home, and to the 6 Magikarp she had raised there, wondering if they were doing well. The ranch happened to be built right beside the river. Surveying the terrain, Megan decided to have her brother dig out a pond on the ranch grounds, a safe, natural home for the Magikarp she cared for so dearly. "Not bad," Lucian said approvingly after inspecting the plan. The arrangement pleased him, everything on the ranch was falling neatly into place. Once all the preparations were complete, Lucian returned to the main territory with Dratini and Snivy by his side. Almost immediately, several notifications began to flicker across the dashboard in his mind. Satisfaction plus 30. Satisfaction plus 10. Satisfaction plus 15. The source of these new points was clear, the Vespiquen and her combi hive. Lucian glanced at his total satisfaction level. It had now reached 2,700. "A few more, and I'll be able to unlock another set of technologies," he murmured, his heart stirring with excitement. But before he could even open the tech panel, Gerald burst through the door, breathing heavily yet composed enough to kneel on one knee before his lord. "Your Highness." He held out a fragment of pottery in both hands. "There seems to be something buried beneath the ore," Gerald reported. When Haxorus and I descended into the lower shaft today, we discovered what appears to be the remains of an ancient structure, a ruin belonging to some long-lost tribe.
Lucian blinked in surprise.
Taking the pottery shard, he turned it over carefully in his palm.
Carved upon its weathered surface was a circular sun emblem, faint but unmistakable. He had seen a similar symbol before, deep within the mines. But this world was still in its medieval era. Thousands of years before modern civilization. Could an even older culture have existed here, long before this age? And what did this sun symbol represent? The god of the sun, could it be the legendary Pokémon Solgaleo? But this was Unova, not Alola.
His curiosity surged.
Have you gone inside the ruins yet? Lucian asked, his tone calm but eyes sharp. Gerald shook his head. Not yet, Your Highness. As soon as we made the discovery, I came back to report. Lucian nodded slowly, thinking.
Then, he said, rising to his feet, we'll go take a look together. Gerald's eyes widened slightly.
Your Highness, it's dangerous underground. Lucian smiled faintly. You'll protect me, won't you? A brief silence passed, then the knight's expression softened into a resolute grin.
Of course, Gerald replied firmly.
As your knight, I will guard you with my life. Chapter 88, The Incarnation of the Sun. Mine, underground level.
Lucian returned to the same subterranean passage he had discovered during his last expedition. He and Gerald now stood before a massive slab of stone engraved with strange, curling patterns. At its center, faintly visible in the flickering torchlight, was a symbol that resembled a radiant sun. Lucian studied it for a long moment before asking quietly.
Gerald, do you know what civilizations existed in this land before the founding of the Kingdom of Eindhoek?
Gerald furrowed his brow, thinking carefully. As far as I know, Your Highness, he replied, before the founding of Eindhoek, this region was ruled by an ancient kingdom known as the Perse Empire. But, these carvings don't match anything they left behind.
Lucian's gaze deepened. What about before that?
Gerald shook his head slowly. I'm afraid that's beyond my knowledge, Your Highness.
Perhaps one of the royal city's ancient scholars might know more. Lucian nodded thoughtfully. Ancient scholars, those who specialized in studying lost civilizations and forgotten cultures. I see.
He didn't seem disappointed, only contemplative. Even in this world of Pokémon, history followed the same rhythm as his old one, endless cycles of rise and fall. Empires waged war, kingdoms crumbled, and new nations rose from their ashes, over and over again. As they pressed deeper into the tunnel, Lucian soon spotted the familiar Rhydon that had attacked him and Snivy before. At once, Gerald stepped protectively in front of him. He didn't need to speak, the gleam in his eyes was enough. With a nod, the Haxorus beside him lunged forward. A flash of cold light burst from its twin axe-like tusks, cleaving through the darkness. The Rhydon roared in pain before turning tail and fleeing into the shadows. All clear, Your Highness, Gerald said evenly. It must be said, having such a formidable man around really gave him a sense of security. Together, they continued through the narrow, winding tunnel that cut deep into the mountain. The deeper they went, the heavier and thicker the air became. Gerald struck a flint and lit a torch, the flame casting an amber glow over the rock walls. Slowly, as the light spread, faint outlines began to emerge around them, remnants of ancient structures carved directly into the stone. Though weathered by time, the shapes of collapsed pillars and broken doorways still hinted at what might once have been a thriving underground city. Be careful, Your Highness, Gerald warned quietly, his torch held high. We're deep underground now. Lucian hummed in acknowledgement but had already become transfixed by something else. Across the walls stretched a series of ancient murals, their lines rough yet full of emotion. He stepped closer, brushing away dust to reveal more of the faded images. The carvings told a story. Primitive humans clad in animal hides and grass skirts roamed the land, hunting with stone spears and bows. Then, the climate changed, a blizzard descended, and the figures collapsed in the snow, lifeless. But then, further along the wall, a new scene unfolded. The survivors knelt before a blazing sun-like shape,
its rays etched with reverence and awe.
By the final mural, the people had gathered in great numbers, all kneeling, arms raised toward the radiant symbol.
Lucian's heartbeat quickened.
Clearly, these figures lived in an even older, pre-civilized, tribal era. His gaze lingered on the carved sun.
Unova, a sun god.
He whispered, his mind racing. Could it be that this sun was not Solgaleo at all, but the Volcarona, the Pokémon once revered as the incarnation of the sun itself?
Legends of the Volcarona had long circulated throughout Unova.
According to those tales, in the coldest and most desolate lands, the Volcarona was revered as the incarnation of the sun itself, a fiery deity of warmth and rebirth. Ancient murals depicted it descending from the heavens in a cocoon of living flame, bringing life and heat to both people and Pokémon suffering through endless winter. As Lucian studied the carvings, a strange realization began to take shape in his mind.
So that's it. These ruins must be tied to the Volcarona.
Your Highness Lucian, we're nearing the lowest level, Gerald warned, a faint tension in his voice.
Please be cautious. I can feel something down there. Lucian nodded. I know.
He glanced at Dratini and Snivy, giving a silent signal for them to ready themselves.
Both Pokémon lowered their bodies, alert and focused.
They followed the tunnel downward until, at last, it opened into a vast underground chamber.
Lucian's breath caught.
Before them stood a colossal ruin, its base formed of crumbling, stepped stone like an ancient pyramid, and a ring of weather-worn pillars surrounded it like sentinels of a forgotten age. Even more striking was the heat. The air here was noticeably warmer than the surface, heavy with the faint scent of sulfur and ash. And despite being buried far beneath the earth, the cavern was lit by a soft, golden glow that bathed everything in gentle warmth. Yet this light did not comfort Gerald, it only made his instincts sharpen. Your Highness, he murmured, hand already on his blade, I sense hostile presences.
Be on guard.
The Haxorus beside him let out a low growl, its crimson eyes gleaming. Then, from the far side of the ruins, came a series of guttural, rasping cries.
DRM. DRM.
A pack of fiery, red-furred, gorilla-like Pokémon burst out from the shadows, their massive fists wreathed in heat.
Darmanitan.
Before Lucian could react, the first Darmanitan swung its burning fist toward Gerald.
Clang.
Steel met flame, Gerald blocked the blow with his sword. Sparks scattered as the heat scorched his armor, but the knight stood firm, unmoving.
The Darmanitan recoiled, its wide eyes flashing with disbelief. This human had withstood its strike.
But Gerald countered with a twist of his wrist and drove the creature back, his sword's hilt striking squarely against its chest.
Druma.
The Darmanitan roared in pain, tumbling backward across the stone floor. Gerald, ever disciplined, did not strike to kill, only to repel. Yet the others howled in fury.
Diruma. Diruma. Diruma.
They pounded their chests, flames crackling across their bodies, and surged forward in a wave of blazing red.
Your Highness, behind you.
Several slipped past the line, rushing straight for Lucian.
Lucian did not flinch. Snivy, Vine Whip. Dratini, Twister. Vine. Min.
With a sharp crack, Snivy's twin vines lashed out, striking two Darmanitans squarely across the face and sending them staggering back. At the same time, Dratini spun its slender body, unleashing a twister that erupted into a roaring spiral of wind and heat. The vortex collided with the attackers, scattering them like leaves in a storm. Within moments, the cavern filled with the sounds of battle, whips slicing the air, dragon winds shrieking through the dark, and the guttural cries of the enraged Darmanitan echoing off the ancient stone. One by one, the fiery apes began to falter. The last few turned tail, howling as they fled back into the darkness. And in the sudden stillness that followed, Lucian stood in the golden light of the underground ruin, heart pounding. The air was still thick with heat, and somewhere deeper within the ruins, he could feel it.
A faint, pulsing warmth. Like a heartbeat. Chapter 89, To Protect.
It was a majestic, mysterious creature, its deep blue eyes gleaming like twin stars, its plump body surrounded by a soft, radiant collar of white fur. From its back sprouted 3 pairs of vast, flaming wings, each one burning with the brilliance of a living sun. Its sheer size was staggering, nearly 3 meters tall, and every movement radiated a sacred, commanding presence. Lucien froze, breath-catching in awe. It was the Pokémon spoken of in Unnovan legend, the sun god of flame and rebirth. Volcarona. The moment it appeared, the air itself began to shimmer. The temperature in the cavern soared, the stone walls reflecting its golden light until the entire underground chamber blazed like daylight. With one powerful beat of its wings, a wave of searing wind swept outward, scattering sparks like a fiery storm. "Your Highness, stand back!" Gerald barked, stepping protectively in front of Lucien. His sword flashed as he raised it, ready to strike. Lucien's mind raced. Volcarona, the fire moth of the ancients, the sun god those tribes worshipped. He hadn't expected, couldn't have imagined, that such a creature still lives beneath these ruins. And judging by its colossal size and the oppressive heat radiating from its body, this was no ordinary Volcarona. Could it really have survived since that age? Has it been guarding this place all alone? Lucien's thoughts were cut short as the Volcarona's gaze shifted. Its blue eyes swept over the Darmanitan pack first, their roars now more like frightened cries, as if pleading with it. Then, slowly, those glowing eyes turned toward Lucien and his companions. "Wait. We don't mean any harm," Lucien called, voice echoing through the cavern. But the Volcarona did not understand, or perhaps, it simply didn't care. A blast of scorching wind tore across the chamber, nearly knocking Lucien off his feet. Then, in a blinding flare of light, the moth's body erupted into golden fire. Its 6 wings beat once, and a firestorm burst forth, consuming the cavern in blinding flame. Dratini, Twister. Snivy, Vine Whip, defend. The air itself trembled. Dratini's whirlwind collided with the inferno but was immediately overwhelmed, hurling the little dragon backward. Snivy's vines lashed out to intercept the oncoming flames, but as a grass type, it never stood a chance. The attack struck, and Snivy was thrown to the ground, struggling to rise. Gerald stepped forward, his sword raised to block the heat, but even his tempered blade began to glow red-hot, warping under the molten air. The Haxorus roared, trying to shield its master, but even it faltered under the overwhelming power. And then, a thunderous crash. The Volcarona suddenly faltered mid-flight, its blazing wings flickering, and then it fell, slamming into the stone floor. The golden light dimmed. The roaring heat vanished. In an instant, the cavern grew dark and cold again. "Your Highness, move." Gerald's voice rasped weakly before he collapsed to one knee, driving his sword into the ground to stay upright, then falling still. Haxorus let out a low growl before its strength gave out as well. Lucien stood frozen, the last one standing. Across the chamber, the fallen Volcarona lay motionless, its flames extinguished, but the Darmanitan weren't done. Seeing their guardian fall, they erupted into rage, howling as they charged straight toward Lucien. His pulse quickened. Dratini was down. Haxorus couldn't move. Even Gerald was unconscious. Only Snivy stirred. Vine. The little Pokémon trembled on the ground, eyes half closed, but as it saw Lucien cornered, something inside it ignited. It refused to let him die. It had to protect him, no matter what. Even as its vision blurred, even as its strength waned, it gritted its teeth. "I need power. More power to protect him." But from where? The answer had already appeared in Snivy's mind. At that moment, it no longer resisted the surge of power building within it. This time, it wasn't evolving to become stronger, it was evolving to protect the human it loved. Vine. Snivy struggled to its feet, trembling, then leapt forward and planted itself in front of Lucien. Its vines lashed out defiantly as its small body erupted in a blinding white light. Vine, Vine. The charging Darmanitan slammed headlong into the radiance, their roars drowned out by the roaring energy that filled the cavern. Lucien's eyes widened. The brilliance reflected in his gaze like twin stars. The evolution of Snivy, Servine, the grass serpent Pokémon, was born. A surge of verdant energy exploded from its body, swirling like a living storm. Magic leaf. Hundreds of glowing, blade-like leaves whirled through the air, slicing across the battlefield in a violent, beautiful arc. The Darmanitan screeched in fear, the storm driving them backward, until they retreated, stumbling back to the slumbering Volcarona's side. As the air calmed, Lucian rushed to Geralt and Dratini, checking them quickly. Relief washed over him, they had only fainted, not burned. So even in its fury, the Volcarona had held back. Still, the sheer scale of its power was terrifying. If it had truly survived since the tribal era, then its strength was likely equal to that of a legendary Pokémon. Lucian turned toward the fallen moth, his system window shimmering faintly as basic information surfaced. Pokémon, Volcarona, end of life. Type, Fire/Bug. Ability? Moves? Record? End of life. Lucian murmured, stunned. This Volcarona was dying. He looked to the Darmanitan gathered around it. Their expressions were no longer hostile, only protective, desperate. And then it struck him. They weren't defending the ruins. They were defending Volcarona. Wait, Darmanitan, we're not your enemies. Lucian called, stepping forward carefully. He glanced at the faintly breathing moth and continued softly, my name is Lucian. I'm the lord of this land. I have medicine, perhaps it can help your guardian. He slowly reached into his satchel and withdrew a few glass vials, filled with a pale green potion brewed by Lila. Setting them gently on the ground, Lucian stepped back. Take it to her. The Darmanitan hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances, then one stepped forward, picked up a vial in its massive hands, and carried it to the fallen Volcarona. A faint golden shimmer pulsed as the potion was poured near its mandibles. Moments later, the moth's breathing steadied. Its body glowed faintly once more. Then, with a soft rustle of flame and wind, Volcarona spread its 6 wings again, each feather burning like the sun. Slowly, gracefully, it descended before Lucian. Chapter 90. The Final Dance. Lucian stood frozen before the radiant creature, its entire form blazing with the brilliance of the sun itself. Even from a distance, he could feel its overwhelming pressure, an ancient, divine power that seemed to weigh upon the soul. This Volcarona's strength, he whispered, it's no weaker than the colossal Dragonite from the anime, or even the 2 ancient Pokémon sealed near Pallet Town. Yet beyond that sheer might, there was something else, an aura of sanctity, a quiet holiness that made Lucian instinctively lower his head in reverence. At that moment, he finally understood why the tribes of old had worshipped this creature as the embodiment of the sun, a living god descended from the heavens. He swallowed hard, the heat in the air trembling around him. The Volcarona looked down at the human with calm, sapphire eyes. Gone was its earlier fury. Now its gaze carried only gentleness and depth. Volcarona. Lucian breathed. The moth gave a low, melodic cry. Then, spreading its 6 blazing wings, it turned and drifted gracefully back into the depths of the ruins. It paused at the entrance, tilting its head as though beckoning Lucian to follow. Lucian hesitated, glancing toward the Darmanitan watching nearby. When none made a move to stop him, he stepped forward, following the creature's glowing trail. He climbed a moss-covered staircase flanked by cracked stone walls until he reached the summit, an ancient altar crowning the top of a pyramid-like structure. And there, within a shallow recess of stone, lay a single Pokémon egg. Its shell was marked with fiery crimson patterns that pulsed faintly, as though a tiny heartbeat echoed within. The Volcarona gazed down at it, eyes soft and full of maternal warmth. Around the altar, the Darmanitan formed a protective circle, standing guard with solemn expressions. Lucian stopped short, stunned by the sight. What is this? The instant his eyes met the egg, a string of words surfaced unbidden in his mind. Ultra-ancient Volcarona egg. Mother, a Volcarona that has lived for thousands of years, its power reaching divine level. Note, this egg should have hatched long ago, but for unknown reasons, its vitality became unstable and it fell dormant. To sustain it, the mother has spent millennia nurturing it with the flames of her own life. Lucian's throat tightened. The ancient moth gave a soft, trembling chirp. Its body swayed slightly, the light of its wings flickering. It was dying, holding on only through willpower and love. Even so, it would not abandon its child. In its fading vision, it saw something: hope. Long ago, it had known humans. Those humans had prayed to it, offered their trust, and drawn warmth from its light. Their faith had once given it strength, but no flame burns forever. Now, after centuries alone, the Volcarona could see into the hearts of mortals, and in Lucien's heart, it saw no greed, no malice, only sincerity and compassion. A memory stirred within it, a voice from long ago, echoing from another world. When the time comes, a human of pure heart will arrive. Entrust your child to him. At the time, the Volcarona had doubted the voice. But now, standing before Lucien, it understood. This was the one. With a weary flutter of its wings, the Volcarona let out two soft cries. At once, one of the Darmanitan stepped forward, lifted the glowing egg with careful hands, and approached Lucien. The great ape-like Pokémon stretched its arms upward and gently placed the egg in his arms. Lucien blinked, stunned. This, you're entrusting it to me? The Volcarona's body began to glow with renewed brilliance, the golden fire washing across the chamber until it painted the stone walls crimson. It looked one last time at its child, then at Lucien, and began to dance. Flames spiraled outward, forming radiant circles of light that rose toward the cavern ceiling. It was fiery dance. However, this time, the fiery dance was not meant as an attack, it was an act of inheritance. Golden red light continuously radiated from Volcarona's body, illuminating the entire cavern. Its brilliance was dazzling, blazing like the sun itself. As if moved by a divine will, waves of golden light poured from the heavens, converging upon the Pokémon egg in Lucien's arms. The entire scene was resplendent and magnificent, like a breathtaking fireworks display in the darkness of night. Yet surprisingly, the fire's energy did not feel scorching, instead, it was warm. The Darmanitan blessed by Volcarona watched on, their faces filled with sorrow and grief, yet powerless to stop what was happening. Volcarona's life had reached its end. This was the last thing it could do for its child, to pass down its own essence of flame, filling the egg's flaws and allowing it to hatch and grow like any normal larvesta. Amidst the blinding brilliance, Volcarona's body slowly dissolved into motes of starlight, scattering across the cave. It had chosen to depart. When the light faded, the cavern dimmed once again, and the glow on the Pokémon egg gradually disappeared, returning to its normal state. However, the information hovering above it had changed. Ancient Volcarona egg, an egg that has inherited its mother's essence of flame. The rhythmic pulse within it shows that it may hatch at any moment. Lucien's expression wavered with confusion. What did this mean? That Volcarona had entrusted its child to him, a human it barely knew, so easily? Before him, the Darmanitan wiped away their tears, a few even broke down completely, crying out in anguish. Lucien! Just then, Geralt's voice echoed from behind. He reignited his torch, hurried forward, and asked anxiously, "Your Highness Lucien, are you all right?" "I'm fine," Lucien shook his head, then briefly recounted what had transpired. Geralt's eyes widened in disbelief. Dratny and Servine also turned their gazes toward the warm, glowing egg in Lucien's arms. "In any case, let's return and rest," Lucien said softly, holding the egg closer. Everyone present, humans and Pokémon alike, had suffered injuries of varying degrees. With Volcarona gone, it was best to return to the territory for treatment. "Yes, Your Highness," Geralt responded. Before leaving, however, Lucien turned to look at the Darmanitan, as well as the small fire-type Pokémon nearby. He asked, "Now that the Volcarona is gone, what will you do next?" The Darmanitan and Darumaka were fire-types who had lived here only because Volcarona's presence made this underground cave as warm as a volcano, a perfect habitat. But now, with the Volcarona gone, the special ecosystem had vanished. The cave was growing colder and darker, no longer suitable for them. Daruma. The Darmanitan looked uncertain, unsure of their next move. Seeing this, Lucien thought for a moment, then offered, "Why don't you come back with me? After all, It's said that the droppings of Darumaka and Darmanitan are warm. In some cold regions, people even collect them and hold them in their hands as natural hand warmers to ward off the chill. That wraps up this part of What If Transmigrated to a Medieval Pokémon World. Thanks so much for listening. As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Quick reminder. The series What If Transmigrated as Minato Namikaze and What If Fishing System in Food Wars World will be going on hold soon, since we're nearly caught up with the author. So now, I need your help picking the next project for the channel. I'm currently deciding between these 3 fanfics. What if creating the strongest Strawhat crew by reading manga? What if Transmigrated and taking over Ichigo's body? What if martial artist Reborn is Kenichi Shirahama? Please vote in the poll and let me know which stories you'd like to see next. I'll take the top 2 picks and start working on those series next. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.